Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Galactic aliens neglected their ugly alien dog, but what happened next would shock the galaxy. The bustling streets of the Endes marketplace were filled with vibrant colors, strange scents, and the murmur of countless alien tongues. Creatures from every corner of the galaxy gathered here, trading everything from rare minerals to exotic pets. In the farthest, most neglected corner of the market, a massive creature lay curled up on the cold metal floor, ignored by nearly everyone who passed by. Grim was his name, or at least that's what the merchant, who had tried and failed to sell him, called him. He was a Corian hound, a breed bred for war, known for its immense size, strength, and fierce loyalty. But Grim was different. His fur was patchy and rough, his right leg twisted slightly from a birth defect, and his face was scarred, not from battle, but from the cruel mockery of those who found him too ugly to be worth keeping. He had been abandoned by his previous owners, a noble alien family who couldn't bear the shame of parading around an imperfect pet, and so Grim was left to fend for himself in the overcrowded marketplace, fed scraps by a reluctant merchant who only kept him alive in the hope that some desperate buyer might one day take pity on him. But no one did. Day after day, the alien visitors and traders passed by, casting disgusted glances or wide-eyed stares at the hulking, sad-eyed creature. His once vibrant blue eyes had dulled with resignation. He was unwanted, a burden, a mistake left to rot in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Then one day, everything changed. Sergeant Jack Harper strolled through the market, his human features standing out among the mix of alien races. He was a soldier stationed on Rendes, a veteran of countless off-world campaigns with a reputation for being tough, no-nonsense, and focused on duty. Known for his sharp mind, he rarely revealed the heart that lay beneath his rugged exterior. Jack had been making his rounds in the market, expecting to spot potential threats or illegal dealings, when his eyes landed on the massive creature lying in the shadows. The sight of Grim stopped him in his tracks. "Poor thing," Jack muttered under his breath as he took in the creature's scarred face and forlorn expression. Unlike the others who had passed by, Jack didn't see something to be scorned. He saw something else, a reflection of himself. Grim, like him, had been cast aside, deemed unworthy in a galaxy that valued perfection over heart. Jack crouched down slowly, approaching Grim carefully, not wanting to startle the massive hound. Grim's ears perked up, but he didn't move. His dull eyes tracked Jack's movements, waiting for the inevitable sneer or condescending pat before the human would move on like all the others. But Jack didn't believe that would happen. He reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of dried meat from his rations, holding it out toward Grim. The hound hesitated for a moment, sniffing the air cautiously before inching forward and taking the meat from Jack's hand. It was the first kindness Grim had experienced in months. "You're not ugly, big guy," Jack said softly, patting Grim's rough head. "You're just a little beat up, same as the rest of us." Feeling the warmth of Jack's touch, Grim let out a low, contented rumble for the first time in ages. He didn't feel like an outcast, he didn't feel unwanted. Jack stood up, giving Grim one last look before heading back to his patrol. But as he walked away, something tugged at him, pulling him back toward the hound. He couldn't shake the feeling that this creature, abandoned by the galaxy, deserved more. Jack had seen too many lives wasted, too many soldiers thrown away after their usefulness had run out. Grim was no different, a warrior cast aside because he no longer fit someone's ideal. "Let's get you out of here," Jack declared. Jack returned to the market the next day with his decision made. He was going to adopt Grim, no matter what his superiors or the other soldiers said. The creature deserved a second chance, just like any soldier returning from the battlefield. He approached the merchant, who had been half-heartedly tending to Grim. The alien looked up from his stall, his eyes widening in surprise as he saw Jack standing there with a determined look on his face. "I want him," Jack said, his voice steady. The merchant blinked in disbelief. "You mean Grim, the ugly one?" Jack's jaw tightened. "Yeah, the ugly one." Unsure how to price a creature he had given up on selling, the merchant scratched his head. "Well, I guess if you really want him, I'll let him go for 50 credits. Jack nodded and transferred the credits to the merchant without hesitation. As the transaction went through, the merchant sighed with relief, happy to finally be rid of the beast. He motioned for one of his workers to bring over Grim's chain. However, as the worker approached, Grim growled low in his throat, his massive form stiffening with tension. The worker froze, clearly afraid of the hound's size and reputation. Jack stepped forward, holding up a hand. "No need for that, he's coming with me, no chains." The merchant and his worker exchanged doubtful looks, but Jack wasn't about to let them treat Grim like an animal anymore. He knelt down in front of the hound, meeting his eyes with a calm, steady gaze. "Come on, big guy," Jack said softly. "You're free now." Grim hesitated, unsure if this was real, if this human could really be offering him freedom after months of neglect and rejection. But then something in Jack's voice, something genuine, reassured him. Slowly, Grim stood up. Though towering over Jack, he moved with surprising gentleness, padding over to the human with his head held low as if still expecting rejection. Jack reached out, placing a hand on Grim's rough fur. "Good boy," he murmured. "Let's get out of here." The two of them walked side by side through the market, drawing astonished stares from the aliens and merchants who had once mocked Grim. But Jack didn't care. Grim wasn't just some ugly creature anymore. He was Jack's companion, his friend. As they left the market behind, Jack glanced down at Grim, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're not ugly, Grim. You're just misunderstood, and from now on you've got someone who understands you." For the first time in months, Grim felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. As they made their way toward Jack's barracks, Grim knew that his days of being unwanted were finally over. Jack and Grim walked through the winding corridors of the military base. The hound's enormous frame barely fit through the doors. Soldiers and personnel stopped in their tracks, staring at the unlikely duo, many with expressions of surprise, others with a mixture of fear and disgust. Grim was used to the looks, but with Jack at his side, he felt a strange sense of calm. For once, the stares didn't hurt as much. The two of them walked side by side through the market, drawing astonished stares from the aliens and merchants who had once mocked Grim. But Jack didn't care. Grim wasn't just some ugly creature anymore. He was Jack's companion, his friend. As they left the market behind, Jack glanced down at Grim, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're not ugly, Grim. You're just misunderstood, and from now on you've got someone who understands you." For the first time in months, Grim felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. As they made their way toward Jack's barracks, Grim knew that his days of being unwanted were finally over. Jack and Grim walked through the winding corridors of the military base. The hound's enormous frame barely fit through the doors. Soldiers and personnel stopped in their tracks, staring at the unlikely duo, many with expressions of surprise, others with a mixture of fear and disgust. Grim was used to the looks, but with Jack at his side, he felt a strange sense of calm. For once, the stares didn't hurt as much. Grim sniffed the blanket, then curled up on it. His large body took up most of the space as he let out a deep, contented breath and settled in. Jack sat on the edge of his bunk, watching Grim with a sense of satisfaction. For years, Jack had been a solitary figure, dedicated to his duties as a soldier but disconnected from the world around him. He had seen too much loss, too much senseless violence, and it had hardened him, making him wary of getting close to anyone or anything. But Grim was different. Jack saw in the hound a reflection of his own struggles. Both had been discarded, rejected for something beyond their control. Just as Jack had been scarred by battles and forced to fight wars that weren't his own, in Grim, he found a kindred spirit. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of a connection he hadn't known he needed. As the night settled in, Jack glanced at the hound, now snoring softly beside him, and smiled. Shaking his head in disbelief at how quickly Grim had become part of his life, he murmured, "Looks like it's you and me now, buddy. Hope you're ready for this. The base has its rules, and I know adopting a Korean hound is bound to raise questions, but rules have never stopped me before. Grim deserves a second chance, and I'm determined to give it to him." The next morning, Jack took Grim out for a walk around the base, knowing full well that they would face scrutiny from his fellow soldiers. As expected, the moment they stepped outside, heads turned and whispers began circulating. Some soldiers stepped aside cautiously as Grim passed, clearly unnerved by the eyes and reputation of the beast, while others simply stared, eyes wide with disbelief. One of Jack's squadmates, Lieutenant Rhee, spotted them and jogged over with a grin. Rhee was one of the few soldiers who didn't take things too seriously, often finding humor in the most unexpected situations. "Well, well, Harper Ree," he teased, "didn't take you for a dog person, and this is a big dog." He gave Grim a wary once-over, but kept a respectful distance. Jack smirked. "He's not just any dog, Ree. His name's Grim, and he's a Korean hound." Ree raised an eyebrow. "A Korean hound? Aren't those war beasts? You sure you're not going soft on us?" Jack chuckled. "Grim's more than just a war beast. He's a survivor like the rest of us." Ree shook his head, still grinning. "Well, I hope he's as loyal as you think. Harper wouldn't want to be around if he decides to chew someone's arm off." Jack gave Grim a reassuring pat. "He's got a good heart. He won't hurt anyone unless I tell him to." As the morning went on, it became clear that not everyone shared Ree's easygoing attitude. Grim's presence unsettled many of the soldiers, and it wasn't long before Jack was called into the commanding officer's office. Colonel Vaughn, an alien of the TH species, sat behind his desk. His stern, reptilian face was fixed in a frown as Jack entered the room. "Sergeant Harper," Vaughn began coldly, "I've received multiple reports about your companion. You've brought a Korean hound onto this base without clearance. That's highly irregular." Jack stood at attention, his expression calm but resolute. "With all due respect, sir, Grim isn't a threat. He's been trained, and I'm responsible for him. He's not going to cause any trouble." Vaughn's yellow eyes narrowed. "Korean hounds are not pets, Sergeant. They are war creatures bred for battle. What happens when that thing's instincts take over?" Jack met the colonel's gaze steadily. "He's not just a thing, sir. Grim was abandoned and neglected because of how he looked. I've trained him, and he's loyal to me. I trust him with my life." There was a long pause as Vaughn considered Jack's words. "You've always been a good soldier, Harper," Vaughn finally said, his tone softening slightly. "But this isn't just about you. There are concerns about the safety of the others on this base." Jack nodded, understanding the hesitation. "I'll keep Grim under control. If anything happens, I'll take full responsibility. But I'm asking you to give him a chance, just as I would for any soldier in my unit." Vaughn leaned back in his chair, his reptilian eyes searching Jack's face for any signs of doubt. After a tense moment, he sighed. "Fine, but he's your responsibility, Sergeant. Any incidents and he's off this base, understood?" "Understood, sir," Jack saluted sharply. As Jack left the office, a sense of relief washed over him. He knew Grim would prove himself. The real challenge now was showing the rest of the soldiers that the massive hound wasn't a monster, but a companion worth fighting for. Later that day, as Jack returned to his quarters with Grim, Lieutenant Ree approached again, this time with a couple of other squad mates who were curious about the hound. Ree said, giving Grim a cautious glance, "How's he holding up?" Jack smiled, patting Grim's head. "He's doing just fine." One of the other soldiers, a young recruit named Davis, took a tentative step forward, eyeing Grim nervously. Can I pet him?" Jack nodded, keeping a watchful eye on Grim. "Go ahead, he won't bite." Davis hesitated before reaching out his hand, trembling slightly. Grim sniffed the hand before nudging it with his massive head, a soft rumble of contentment escaping his throat. The tension in the air eased as Davis broke into a smile. "Not so bad," he said, his voice filled with surprise. Jack chuckled. "Told you he's got a heart under all that muscle." As the soldiers gathered around, curiosity overtaking their fear, Jack watched with pride as Grim accepted their tentative touches and praise. He had come a long way from the unwanted creature in the market. Now, with Jack by his side, Grim was beginning to find his place, not just in Jack's life, but in the hearts of those around him. In the weeks that followed, Grim slowly became a familiar presence on the military base. Though there were still whispers and wary glances, many of the soldiers grew more comfortable with the hulking Korean hound. Jack had trained him well, and Grim's loyalty to Jack was undeniable. The once-abandoned creature had transformed from a misunderstood beast into a valued member of the unit. Yet, not everyone was convinced of Grim's place. Jack's heart pounded as he ran toward the scene, his mind racing with fear for Grim's safety. When the smoke cleared, Jack found Grim lying in the dirt, his massive body shielding the young recruits from the blast. The hound was battered, his fur singed, but he was alive, groaning in pain but still breathing. The recruits, wide-eyed and trembling, stared at the creature that had saved their lives. "Grim!" Jack shouted, kneeling beside the hound with his hands trembling as he examined Grim's injuries. There was a deep wound on Grim's side, but it wasn't fatal. The hound looked up at Jack, his blue eyes filled with loyalty and relief, as if he were glad to see Jack was unharmed. "Good boy, Grim," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You did good." The recruits gathered around, their expressions filled with awe and guilt. Davis, the one who had accidentally triggered the grenade, knelt beside Grim. His voice shaking, he stammered, "I am sorry, I didn't mean to." Jack shook his head, resting his hand gently on Grim's head. "It's okay, Davis. Grim knew what he was doing." Jack's heart pounded as he ran toward the scene, his mind racing with fear for Grim's safety. When the smoke cleared, Jack found Grim lying in the dirt, his massive body shielding the young recruits from the blast. The hound was battered, his fur singed, but he was alive, groaning in pain but still breathing. The recruits, wide-eyed and trembling, stared at the creature that had saved their lives. "Grim!" Jack shouted, kneeling beside the hound with his hands trembling as he examined Grim's injuries. There was a deep wound on Grim's side, but it wasn't fatal. The hound looked up at Jack, his blue eyes filled with loyalty and relief, as if he were glad to see Jack was unharmed. "Good boy, Grim," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You did good." The recruits gathered around, their expressions filled with awe and guilt. Davis, the one who had accidentally triggered the grenade, knelt beside Grim. His voice shaking, he stammered, "I am sorry, I didn't mean to." Jack shook his head, resting his hand gently on Grim's head. "It's okay, Davis. Grim knew what he was doing." Vaughn nodded, his yellow eyes lingering on Grim. "Loyalty like that is rare. You were right to trust him, Jack." Jack gave a small smile, gently stroking Grim's fur. "He's part of the team, sir. He always has been." Vaughn's gaze softened just slightly. "Keep him close, Sergeant. He's earned his place." In the days that followed, Grim's heroic act helped the base settle into a new rhythm. Grim was no longer just an oddity or a pet. He was a valued part of the unit. Soldiers who had once kept their distance now sought him out, offering treats and pats on the head. Even the most skeptical among them had to admit that Grim had proven himself worthy of their respect. But just as things seemed to be settling down, an unexpected threat loomed on the horizon. One night, while the base was quiet and most of the soldiers were off duty, the alarms blared to life. Jack, who had been resting in his quarters, leaped out of bed, pulling on his uniform and grabbing his blaster. Grim was already awake, standing by the door with his ears perked and his muscles tense. Jack knew something was different this time. It wasn't a drill or a routine attack. This was something bigger, something dangerous. As Jack and Grim rushed to the command center, the reality of the situation became clear. A large enemy fleet, far more organized than the mercenaries they had faced before, was approaching the planet. They were a rogue faction of the Galactic Alliance, once thought to be dismantled but now rising again, and they were coming to take the base. Colonel Vaughn was in the center of the war room, surrounded by maps and tactical screens, as he issued orders with calm urgency. Jack approached, his heart pounding but his mind clear and focused. "Sergeant Harper," Colonel Vaughn said, not looking up from the holographic display, "we've got a full-scale invasion coming our way. We need every able body to defend the base. This is not a fight we can afford to lose." Jack nodded firmly. "Grim and I are ready, sir." Vaughn's eyes flicked toward the hound, who stood at Jack's side, alert and ready. "Good, we need him. If they take the command center, we lose the base. Get your unit to the western gate. That's where they'll hit first." Jack saluted and turned to Grim, who gave a low growl of determination. Together, they moved quickly to rally the squad, preparing for what would undoubtedly be the hardest battle they'd ever faced. The skies above the base darkened as the enemy ships began their descent. The first wave hit the western gate just as Vaughn had predicted, and the battle erupted in a flash of gunfire and explosions. Jack and Grim fought side by side, moving through the chaos with practiced precision. The enemy was relentless, and the battle dragged on into the night. Wave after wave of enemy soldiers attacked, and Jack's unit struggled to hold the line. Through it all, Grim was a force of nature, tackling enemies, protecting the wounded, and rallying the soldiers when their spirits faltered. Even as they fought, Jack could feel the tide turning against them. The enemy forces were too numerous and too well equipped, Slowly, they were being pushed back toward the command center. Jack's mind raced. If they couldn't hold out much longer, the enemy would know it. As the enemy breached the western gate, Jack saw their commander, a towering figure in sleek black armor, directing the assault with cold efficiency. If they could take him out, they might have a chance to destabilize the enemy's ranks. "Grim," Jack called, pointing toward the enemy commander. "We need to take him down, come on." With a fierce growl, Grim surged forward, charging through the chaos toward the commander. Jack followed close behind, his blaster firing as they cut through the enemy forces. They fought their way to the commander, who turned to face them with a chilling, mechanical laugh. "You think you can stop me?" the commander sneered, drawing his blade. "You're too late, your base is lost." But Jack wasn't listening. He and Grim charged together. In a blur of motion, they attacked. The fight was brutal. The commander's blade flashed in the darkness as he blocked Jack's shots and dodged Grim's powerful strikes. Yet Grim, relentless and determined, pressed forward, his massive form overwhelming the commander's defenses. In the final moment, Jack saw his opening. As Grim knocked the commander off balance, Jack fired a single precise shot. The blast hit its mark, and the commander crumpled to the ground, defeated. For a moment, the battlefield went quiet. The enemy forces, seeing their leader fall, hesitated, and in that hesitation, the rebels surged forward, pushing the invaders back. The tide had turned. The battle raged on for hours, but with the fall of their commander, the enemy's coordination began to falter. By dawn, the last of the invaders had been driven from the base, their forces scattered into retreat. The base had held, but the cost had been high. Many soldiers were wounded, and several had fallen in the defense of their home. Jack stood among the rubble, exhaustion settling into his bones. Grim was beside him, panting heavily but unharmed. They had done it. They had survived. As the morning sun rose over the base, casting long shadows across the battlefield, Colonel Vaughn approached. His usual stern demeanor was replaced with something softer as he looked at Jack, then at Grim, and nodded. "You saved us again, Sergeant Harper," Vaughn said quietly. "Grim has proven to be more than just a companion. He saved this base more times than I can count." Jack smiled tiredly, patting Grim's side. "He's always been more than just a companion, sir. He's family." Vaughn nodded again, his eyes lingering on Grim. "The galaxy needs to hear about this. Grim isn't just a hero here. He's a symbol of what we're fighting for: second chances, loyalty, and the bond between man and beast. I'll be recommending him for the highest honors we can give, and I'll be recommending you for promotion. You led your unit with bravery and heart, and this base owes you both its survival." Jack was about to respond when Grim suddenly leaned into him, nudging him with his massive head. Jack chuckled, scratching the hound behind the ears. "Looks like Grim doesn't care much about medals or promotions," he said with a grin. "He's just happy we're all still standing." Colonel Vaughn offered a rare smile and then saluted sharply. "You've earned it, both of you." With that, Vaughn walked away. Jack knelt beside Grim, running his hand through the hound's fur. The battle was over, but their journey was not. They would continue to fight, continue to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. But for now, they could rest, knowing they had done something remarkable. Later that day, as the rising sun bathed the base in a soft, golden light, Jack stood looking out at the horizon, a sense of peace settling over him. Once defined solely by duty, he now stood as a man with a companion, a friend, and a bond that nothing in the galaxy could break. In that moment, Jack knew that no matter what the galaxy threw at them next, they would face it together. "Come on, buddy," Jack said softly, his hand resting on Grim's back. "Let's go home together." They walked back to the base side by side. Grim's steps were slower. His body was worn from the fight, but his head was held high, his loyalty and courage unquestionable. As the sun continued to rise, casting its warm light over the base, Jack knew that no matter what the galaxy threw at them next, they would face it as one.